Have you noticed that the clouds are getting whiter? On a grey day in Oxford, it's pretty hard to believe, but it turns out that the subtle effects that humans are having on the whiteness of clouds is a significant factor in our effect on the climate. Now, you probably remember from doing the water cycle at school that clouds form after water evaporates from rivers and the sea. It rises and cools, and it really wants to turn from a gas back into a liquid, but it needs something to liquefy onto. Luckily, there are loads of teeny tiny particles up in the atmosphere, things like sand blown from the deserts or little granules of sea salt whipped up in spray, and every one of these particles can form the seed of a cloud droplet. The reason that clouds have an effect on the climate is that they're white, and that means they reflect a lot of light. So if sunlight is coming down through the atmosphere, it can bounce off a cloud back into space, rather than being absorbed by the dark blue ocean or the dark green land underneath. And that means that the Earth is cooler than it would be if it weren't for the clouds. So, as well as warming the climate by burning fossil fuels and emitting carbon dioxide, we humans are also adding plenty of extra teeny tiny particles, things like the smoke we emit from cars and factories. And those particles can act as extra seeds for clouds. That means that when a cloud does form, you end up having more droplets of water inside it. And because there are more droplets, but we've got the same total volume of water, those droplets are going to be smaller. I can show you what difference that makes with these glass beads. So these beads are quite big. As you can see, they're a little bit white, but these ones are much smaller, and they look a lot whiter. The reason for that is that although we've got still clear beads, and although we've got the same volume of each, that's one jar, which is a scientific unit, these look much whiter because they've got a much greater surface area. That means that they reflect more light. So smaller beads or smaller droplets of water reflect more light. In fact, because we're adding particles to the atmosphere, we're making the Earth whiter on average and reflecting more sunlight back into space. And every cloud has a silver lining, because it turns out that the clouds are reflecting enough heat to offset about half of the global warming from carbon dioxide, which is quite a big deal. So, could we take this a step further and put even more tiny particles into the atmosphere and cool the Earth down even more? Well, maybe, but the problem with this so-called geoengineering is that it can have unexpected consequences. For example, smaller cloud droplets tend to take longer to bunch together and get large enough to fall out of the sky as rain. And that means that we could end up, through this geoengineering, disrupting the water cycle and causing more environmental damage through droughts or flooding than the global warming that we're trying to prevent. So, until we better understand their complex interplay with the climate, this storm over raindrops is going to see a lot more scientists with their heads in the clouds.